Hi, my name is Liza Madrid, and my presentation is on caloric versus non-caloric sweeteners and their effects on postprandial glucose levels and total energy intake. So currently there are more than 37 million Americans that have type 2 diabetes, and the number of people affected is expected to increase over time. Because of this, research on replacing caloric sweeteners with non-caloric sweeteners for the purpose of diabetes management has risen. Basically, many people have turned to non-caloric sweeteners without knowing their actual ability to assist in long-term diabetes care. Now, when looking at diabetes management, there are two main factors of importance to discuss: postprandial glucose levels and total energy intake. Thus, the nutrition question posed is, what are the effects of caloric versus non-caloric sweeteners on postprandial glucose levels and total energy intake? So non-caloric sweeteners are food additives that are meant to mimic caloric sweeteners in the sense that they provide sweetness to foods, but little to no calories to the body. There are many types of non-caloric sweeteners, but for this research, we are going to focus on two types, stevia and aspartame. And the reason for this is that their differing chemical structures may elicit different physiological responses in the body, especially on glycemia. Caloric sweeteners provide sweetness to foods and calories to the body. For this research, we'll be focusing on one caloric sweetener, and that's sucrose. So postprandial glucose levels refer to the glucose concentration in the body after the consumption of a meal. The short-term effects of stevia and aspartame show that they have little to no effects on postprandial 24-hour postprandial glucose levels. These results suggest that the type of non-caloric sweetener consumed does not pose a major change on glycemia. Consumption of sucrose showed large spikes in 24-hour postprandial glucose levels. And basically, the implication of these results suggests that it may be possible to regulate postprandial glucose levels with non-caloric sweeteners. So looking at the long-term research, only 2 studies have been done to date that only look up to a 12-week period. But both of these studies found that caloric and non-caloric sweeteners have no effect on postprandial glucose levels in the long term. These results may not be reliable, as there have only been 2 studies done to date. Now, a common theme when looking at these studies and postprandial glucose levels was satiety. Past research has suggested a possible relation between blood glucose levels and satiety, as there is speculation that diets that produce low glycemia may be able to improve weight control by promoting increased satiety levels. But multiple research studies did conclude that satiety was in no way related to blood glucose levels. And basically, this is because satiety had no correlation to the type of sweetener consumed or on the varying differences between blood glucose levels. So total energy intake can be defined as the total amount of energy provided by the foods consumed. So past research has had conflictions, as some research has suggested that replacing a caloric sweetener with a non-caloric sweetener will reduce total energy intake, while other studies have suggested that non-caloric sweeteners may result in compensatory overeating, resulting in weight gain. So multiple studies have concluded that caloric sweeteners such as sucrose slightly increase total energy intake in 24-hour short-term periods. But research has found conflicting results for non-caloric sweeteners. Some research has concluded that neither stevia nor aspartame have any significant effect on total energy intake, while other studies have concluded that only stevia resulted in significantly lower intake levels. Differences in these results may be due to the fact that both of these non-caloric sweeteners have different chemical structures, resulting on varied effects on total energy intake. And again, for the long-term research on total energy intake, only 2 studies have been done to date that look up to a 12-week period. So caloric sweeteners were found to slightly increase total energy intake throughout the 12-week period, while non-caloric sweeteners were found to significantly decrease total energy intake. The implications of this, though, suggest that energy intake levels of non-caloric sweeteners may not have significant effects in the short term, but rather in long-term management. Again, these results may not be reliable, as only 2 studies have been done. So a common theme throughout these studies when looking at total energy intake was weight management. Past research has suggested that if non-caloric sweeteners have the ability to reduce energy intake, then subsequently they may result in actual weight loss. But it's also speculated that a decrease in energy intake may be related to compensatory overeating. The short-term and long-term results have concluded that when caloric sweeteners increase energy intake, this leads to an increase in weight. But when non-caloric sweeteners decrease energy intake levels, this is associated with slight weight loss. The implications of these results suggest that non-caloric sweeteners may be used as a means of weight management. So now going back and answering our research question. What are the effects of caloric versus non-caloric sweeteners on postprandial glucose levels and total energy intake? So looking at postprandial glucose levels alone in 24-hour short-term periods, non-caloric sweeteners led to an increase in postprandial glucose levels, while non-caloric sweeteners had little to no effect on them. Now looking at the long-term 12-week periods, caloric sweeteners resulted in no significant difference, and non-caloric sweeteners resulted in no significant difference on postprandial glucose levels. Now looking at total energy intake in 24-hour short-term periods, caloric sweeteners led to a slight increase in energy intake, while non-caloric sweeteners had their results vary, as either there was no significant difference on total energy intake or stevia lowered energy intake. Now looking at the long-term 12-week period, caloric sweeteners led to a slight increase in energy intake, while non-caloric sweeteners led to a major decrease in total energy intake. Now looking at gaps in literature. Research on caloric sweeteners versus non-caloric sweeteners is still extremely limited. Currently, there are only 2 studies to date that only extend to a 12-week period. So it's suggested that future studies look at the long-term effects for longer periods of time. Future studies also needs to look at how non-caloric sweeteners affect energy intake in the short term, as current research has many conflicting results. When discussing energy intake, future research also needs to look at the differences between men and women, because many of these studies cited that they failed to do so. This issue becomes even more significant when discussing weight management, as total energy intake tends to vary between men and women. So lastly, future research should also expand to comparing and contrasting more types of non-caloric sweeteners and caloric sweeteners, because current research has suggested that all these sweeteners metabolize differently due to their different chemical structures. Now, applications to practice. So the current findings of this research are extremely important to diabetes and hyperglycemia, as it was found that non-caloric sweeteners had little to no effect on postprandial glucose levels. Non-caloric sweeteners may be used to control blood glucose levels. And as current research has also found that non-caloric sweeteners may be able to decrease energy intake in the long term, this means that possibly they may not result in compensatory overeating, which strengthens the notion that this may be useful for diabetes management, as weight loss has been found to be associated with these results. Weight loss is not only extremely significant for diabetes management, but it makes it easier to manage blood glucose concentration, and it may also help reduce the risk for other diseases related to diabetes. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening.